In September 2020, Donald Trump's supporters hoped to turn unverified and dubiously sourced material on Hunter Biden's laptop into an October surprise that would sink Joe Biden's presidential campaign. The operation appeared eerily similar to the October surprise 4 years earlier, when newly discovered emails on the laptop of Anthony Weiner, then husband of Clinton aide Huma Abedin, led the FBI to reopen its investigation into Clinton's use of a private email server. For a variety of reasons, the 2020 iteration did not have the same effect, nor did it ultimately succeed. Now, 2 years later, the hard drive associated with Hunter Biden's laptop has been duplicated and passed to a variety of sources, including federal law enforcement, right-wing influencers, and pro-Kremlin media figures. There is no longer a single hard drive, and increasingly, those who wish to advance an agenda through baseless claims and conspiracy theories can point to their version of the hard drive as an ultimate source of proof. I'm Griff Somke.
And I'm Jay McKenzie.
And this is the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. So, Jay, what are the similarities between the narratives that came out of the Steele dossier and the stories that we're seeing related to Hunter Biden's laptop?
I think what's similar is they've both kind of already become whatever you want them to become, right? They've become extremely partisan in terms of, the narrative around them is extremely different on one side of the aisle compared to the other. And with Republicans, the dossier is fake, and it's all part of the Russia hoax and the fake collusion narrative.
Right.
On the left, it proves everything that Trump does is literally taking orders from Putin or, someone from Russia working for Putin on a daily basis, and he's controlling his every action. And, let's state our our personal opinions here. We certainly think Trump has a extremely weird
relationship with the Kremlin, whatever it is. It's definitely not the relationship most people have with the Kremlin.
I hate saying that, but it's still not fully grasped or researched or understood.
And part of the reason for that is because stuff like the Steele dossier gets in the way.
Yeah, because things in the Steele dossier that were verified, they were real, they happened. There were a few things that were debunked, but really most of it is just kind of out there in the ether.
Right.
And it's not verified or debunked, and it's kind of largely unprovable. Like, you look at the big stories around it was Michael Cohen meeting with Russian intelligence officers in Prague in 2016.
Right.
And we saw some stories that started to corroborate it, that maybe, okay, we've got some verification here, and it looked like that could be going forward. But then Cohen always denied it, always said it wasn't real. And even after he flipped, and started giving evidence against Trump,
that one just never came up.
Whenever it did, he didn't change his story, right? He still says it never happened. And the guy's a liar.
Right.
I mean, we know that doesn't mean it didn't happen, because he lies. And okay, maybe he started, dishing on Trump to some extent. I feel like he still left out some things in terms of what he knew about Russia. I think everything that could hurt Trump domestically, he's been, I think, fairly forthright and kind of let loose. But there's still some things that he's said about Russia that I think we both...
Yeah, there's people he's not going to talk about, and there's things he's not going to talk about at this point.
Here, in the U.S., he did face some jail time. But when you say the wrong thing about the Russian mobsters that he has affiliated with, if he knows what's good for him, he's not going to dish all. We saw it too with Lev Parnas, right? Who went after he got indicted with Igor Fruman for their fraud guarantee work, where they guaranteed some fraud for sure with Rudy Giuliani over there. But
dude got himself a hashtag and a second career as like a anti-Trump activist, and it's just
is he still going? Is he in jail?
He is, absolutely is.
Okay, I know his son is.
Oh yeah, chip off the old block on that one. Seriously,
DNC official down in Florida, just fighting the good fight. Son of a Russian mobster, but
yeah, now he's at DeSantis. That's his new thing,
No,
is ripping on DeSantis. Big time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, in any case, Steele dossier, it's just, I think too many people on the left took it at face value, and for the right, it was just, let's make the entire argument about this, right? Let's make the entire argument about the dossier. Let's focus on what's either been debunked or isn't verifiable. And some of the stuff talking about discussions that happened in the Kremlin and various people falling in and out of favor and
Russian hookers in a hotel room in Moscow.
Which again, good luck proving that one. Yeah, maybe there are tapes of Trump out there, but the FSB has them,
right?
And good luck getting them.
You're not going to see them.
Yes,
it's just not
right. You're not going to see them, and even if you saw a tape, right? Can you even be sure that it's authentic? Yeah. And and they're going to deny it. And at this point, honestly, I mean, what could there be a tape of Trump doing that his hardcore supporters would denounce him for or would leave his side for?
There just isn't anything. There could be a tape of him having lunch with Hillary Clinton and he would find some way to explain it. They just
and she hands him a hard drive, right? And then like you see her mouth, burn it or acid wash it, and he
do it. Yes,
he nods along with it.
It wouldn't matter. They are in it to win it with that guy, and they aren't changing.
I mean, if he did that, the QAnon people would tell you something about the 4D chess. He was framing her, and he was working for at one point they like to say he was working for the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
That's been 5 years though, because he was undercover for the FBI and after the deep state and something, and then somewhere along the way we just decided we hate the FBI and want to defund them. So so there's just all that uncertainty over the Steele dossier. And when we look at Hunter's laptop, right, when they first rolled it out in 2020, right before Election Day, it was September, October of 2020, and the right certainly thought they could turn it into 2016 with Hillary's emails and the FBI investigation that there's good reason to believe that's what cost her the election.
Right.
And I understand why it happened. I understand why Comey did it. We're not going to sit here and debate whether it was the right or wrong thing, because we are where we are, right?
That is ancient history at this point in the political process, I think. Just not a lot of point in going back over what James Comey did 6 years ago.
Yeah, but if you look at where we are now with the laptop, you've got plenty of people on the left, I think, just assume there's absolutely nothing to it. It's all fake. It's Russian disinformation. Mm-hmm. It's just don't even look at it, pay attention to it. And it's all fake, and it's not even Joe. It's Hunter. So why, this is just some crazy fever dream by Rudy Giuliani, who's clearly a crazy person. So it's just dismissed. But then, of course, we look at what the left is saying and the right is saying, and the right is using the laptop to, they're at the point where Joe Biden is controlled by China, and he's owned by Xi Jinping, and they're now controlling him the way that some people on the left thought Russia was controlling
Trump. And the laptop proves it.
And the laptop proves it. This thing that we found on the laptop, the big guy is definitely Joe Biden, and that's on the laptop, and it's verified. And whoever, that initially came from, whether it was InfoWars or OAN or
GNet or
whatever person or group or thing put that out there. The way the right-wing ecosystem works, I mean, it could have started on 4chan and then Cat Turd.
Yeah.
Somebody picked it up on Twitter, and then it's just in their world, right? Like, maybe no one even...
It's an article of faith at that point for them that this is actually what happened.
Right. Like, why go fact check it? Because Cat Turd told me it was a thing.
Some person named Cat Turd who posts on Twitter as Cat Turd.
I mean, he wouldn't lie to me.
Absolutely
he knows.
Not. He's Cat Turd.
He knows. He's Cat Turd. He knows that Trump is Jesus.
Mm-hmm. The real intelligence officer that's working against the deep state has to leak it on 4chan because reasons.
Yeah, well, otherwise they just cancel him.
Right. Fate worse than death there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's become, if you read some of the stuff and see where they've gotten, of course they make this My Son Hunter movie because which I haven't seen it, but I've read a couple people who have seen it, and it just sounds horrible. They stop it throughout and have these little thought bubbles. It's like they're fact checking themselves, or it's like it's like a kind of racy documentary, but with a plot. It's just it's silly, but it's also, of course they're doing it. I mean, of course they're selling merch.
Go Wing Wei or Steve Bannon or Robert Mercer gave them a bunch of money to go make a movie like that, and here we are.
Like you said, it's an article of faith, and everyone seems to think they know what the truth is here, and the truth is rarely so simple.
Right.
And we did feel like, hey, we've got to separate fact from fiction and what we know versus, okay, here's where we are now. Here's what we can say. Here's what we definitely can prove. There are CNN and has reported on actual, federal investigations, and they have actual sources.
Right.
And you may not care. You may not, and you may want to stick on Joe Biden is not implicated. And to be clear, Joe Biden has not been implicated in anything. But let's also, if you want to debunk the craziness that the right is going to cook up next on the laptop, then let's at least lay out the facts as we know them so that you can be better informed. And it's just easier to say, yeah, that part was true, but this part is crazy and it's nonsense.
Right. So you talked about the facts as we know them and how we know that there's a lot of stuff about this situation that's pretty ambiguous to be nice about it. Do we know that any other foreign country had anything to do with this at this point? I mean, is there Russian or Chinese involvement in any of the release of this material that we actually know and can speak to with any degree of certainty?
There isn't. I don't think we can say that will never be proven,
right,
that it's an impossibility. And it certainly looked at the time like, hey, there's a lot of warning signs here. It's an election. Russia's meddling never ended. There's talk about them picking a side. Certainly, like Ratcliffe, who was, Trump's DNI at the time, was saying, oh, China's gearing up to try and influence the election. And his statements were kind of dubious because he was very partisan. Mm-hmm. So there were reasons to think, okay, maybe this is the thing. Rudy Giuliani has been out there desperately digging for dirt. I mean, if there's ever been a thirsty old man,
right,
like that was the guy.
And that's been his role. The entire Trump administration was flying all over the world and trying to dig up narrative.
Anything.
Yeah. I mean, we saw it with Ukraine when he went over there and came up with a story about Hunter and Burisma. And
there were some other things that he tried. He went out to Kazakhstan at
right,
one point. I mean, he was doing speeches. He may have done, I feel like he went to Armenia at one point. He was certainly, he put out a wide net, right? So anyone who's looking back at this and saying, oh, Russian disinformation, the 50 people who signed the letter and said, oh, this looks like Russian disinformation, they just made it up and it's all like, how could they do this? And they just lied. And all. I think it was a very hectic and chaotic time, and you couldn't say definitively that it was Russian disinformation at the time, but I don't blame people for hesitating. I don't blame journalists for not reporting on unverifiable information. Even if they could get to the hard drive or a copy of the hard drive, how could they verify anything?
You can't.
In time, to get it out before the election. If they're wrong, not only are they influencing an election, but they're influencing an election with lies, with potentially hacked.
There goes your career.
Right. Exactly. Who would want to touch that?
Right.
So I don't blame people for not going after it. The whole thing is, so much of it is hard to definitively prove, right? Because even the computer repairman who supposedly took Hunter's laptops, Hunter came to his shop, he signed his name, he handed this guy his stuff, and then Hunter never came back. The guy legally took possession of it, right? The repairman named
John Paul McIsaac.
Right. Yeah, but he is legally blind. Now, a lot of people saw that and said, okay, the legally blind guy, of course, he how could he even look at the laptops? Now, he is legally blind, but recent New York Magazine post on this made it clear that he has been working on computers a long time and he has, special lenses that let him actually see the work. So okay, that totally makes sense.
Legally blind doesn't mean actually blind. It means that you don't have vision past a certain point. There are ways to work around that. I've known plenty of people who qualified as legally blind that could drive cars with the proper correction. That happens.
Exactly. So he is completely capable of doing his job. But the other issue here is he can do his job, he can see his work, but can he see a person that's 5 feet away from him? Not clearly. So can he definitively say that was Hunter Biden? No, even he can't say that was definitely him. He can say the guy told me his name and he signed his name, but did he see Hunter Biden? No, he didn't. And we don't have any cameras. We don't have any other evidence. He was apparently the only one who worked there, or at least was the only one there that day. So yeah, it's what can we say for certain? Did it pass through anybody else's hands? Did somebody show up at the shop pretending to be Hunter Biden? I don't know. And I'm not saying that happened or that that's likely. I'm just saying we can't disprove a whole lot here. And that is troubling, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah. And with that level of uncertainty, it makes sense, like you said, that no reputable news outlet would want to touch this. They just can't. They can't chain of custody any of this stuff. They've got an unreliable narrator that's kind of telling you the story. The story itself is coming from some of the sketchiest sources out there right now. Yeah, no, pass. Not going to have my name on that. Not going to potentially risk my job and my career by being the person who wrote that up and potentially swung the election to Trump. So yeah, it makes perfect sense why you wouldn't want to go near it. And, you know, as you sort of talk about in the piece, it does seem kind of like, isn't the uncertainty sort of the point of it all?
Yeah, and I think that's why it was attractive to the right at the time, because how much did they care about fact checking, and how much, you know, they also kind of liked the fact that no one would report on it.
Yeah, they got some mileage out of that.
Because, of course, they don't trust the mainstream media. Oh, the media won't cover this, and the media are being censored and all these things. And I think they thought that would help them, and I think it could have, and maybe it did to an extent if they hadn't rolled it out so terribly. You know, there were competing groups who were trying to push different aspects of this. That, you know, there's a lot of people on the right were focused on the laptop, but then Tony...
Yeah, Bobolinsky.
Yeah.
Tony Babs.
Bobolinsky. Okay.
Right.
So, well, yeah, Tony Bobolinsky gets mentioned by Trump at the debate, and Biden kind of dismisses all of that because nobody really knew what he was talking about. I mean, I did, but it was like me and, you know, like 100 other people that are actually reading all of this nonsense every day. But it's
not enough to swing an election.
No. And you had, okay, we've got 30,000 emails, and you've got this group with Bobolinsky over here, you know, with Don Jr. and Arthur Schwartz, and then you've got OAN running segments, and then you've got Steve Bannon and
Go Wing Wei running stuff over on that side of things. This is the kind of thing that, like, they probably wish they had, like, a Roger Stone to help them quarterback, because the way it went...
God, they needed somebody. They needed somebody to be like, okay, guys, this is a fucking mess, and we're going to do this way. We're going to focus on these 10 emails, right? Or this theme, just China, just this one company in China. Like, if they just focused on CEFC China, which, you know, we talked about in the piece, which is partnered with Chinese military intelligence, right? In any case, they could have picked something, a theme, and instead it was, you know, okay, it's Hunter in Ukraine and Hunter in Russia and Hunter in China, and here's this other business associate, and oh yeah, the uncle is involved, and
here's some pictures of Hunter with hookers, and here's some pictures of Hunter smoking crack. All this other stuff, it's impossible to keep up with it.
He admitted to that. Like, are you just shaming him?
Everyone in the country knows the dude's got a drug problem. I mean, it's not like he's ever hidden it.
Right. If you were hardcore MAGA and addicted to Twitter and all that, like, you saw this stuff and maybe you kind of made sense of it, but you were voting for him anyway.
Right.
But anybody in the middle looked at this stuff and said, I don't even know what they're trying to say here, and there's nothing about this connecting back to Joe, so I just don't care. It just didn't work for them. They tried and it didn't work, but now we're here 2 years later. And I think it's wrong to have called this Russian disinformation, though, like we said, there was reason to believe it was at the time. But it's almost like we're in a second op here. Like it's evolved into this new thing. And the way Russian disinformation works, you flood the zone with a bunch of details, information, stories, all of this, and a lot of it is true, a lot of it is real.
Mm-hmm.
But interspersed among the real things that actually happened are little details that are off, maybe a big story that's just fake, not real. But then there's some more real stuff. Then there's, you keep selling people on the real things, and then you just sort of add in the fake stuff, the stuff that's slightly off. But the way that it works, right, if you're looking at Russia's goals, what does Russia want? Well, they want maximum chaos in the West, in the US. They want infighting. They know that Twitter and social media runs on outrage.
Right. And they figured out how to make that happen pretty much whenever they choose to. So...
Right. So let's just go with it, right? Let's keep putting out the real information, but let's also, dump in this fake stuff that, the left can pick out and say it's fake. And they're right. Of course they're right. There's going to be stuff in there. Even Mac Isaac, the computer repairman, has said he's seen stuff that's not real, that people are, using the laptop now to call Hunter a pedophile, because of course they do. These people call everyone they don't like a pedophile. But, even he has plenty of gripes, and you could say justified reasons to be angry about how he's been treated.
But who's listening to him? It's off and running.
Right.
Yeah, he could come out and he could do a tell-all interview where he says, they've lied about this, they've lied about that, break it all down. But it's not really going to matter because the story's out there.
And the people who believe are going to keep believing the real things and the fake things, and the people who don't believe are not going to believe any of it, but they're going to focus on the things that have definitely been proven as fake, right? It's like we said, it's just like the Steele dossier. You've each got your own narrative, your own set of beliefs that you are certain is real, and you just let's fight about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we saw a lot of the same thing. Like there were, left-leaning sources that had ideas of what was in the Steele dossier that really weren't. There was this idea of all of these things being outlined and explained, and it's like, no, none of that was.
Well, it even went beyond that too, right? It's even if you look at the dossier and think of all the things that are outlandish and impossible in it, it went further than that on Twitter and certain groups on the left who extrapolated more from it. And I mean, I personally looked into some of this stuff and wondered about some of this stuff, and the dossier didn't cover everything, but a lot of people took that to crazy, unreal, impossible places. But also you had the Mueller report, you had the Senate Intelligence, the 5-volume
Senate Intelligence Committee report,
which was very thorough and was actually much more damning of Trump. And it went far beyond the Steele dossier, and it didn't rely on the Steele dossier. It wasn't about that. It was about, hey, there are some real concerning things that we've observed here between Trump and Russia. And so they absolutely started on what we knew, right, which was that Russia interfered. Mm-hmm. And then investigating Russia's interference led to looking at the Trump campaign and who they were talking to and what they were doing and what they were involved with. And what you got with that 5-volume report was far beyond the Steele dossier ever tried to. And of course it got further because it was years later, and
we knew a lot more.
A lot more.
Certain people were willing to go on the record and talk. Certain people were willing to potentially not go to jail and talk. There was a lot of things that got exposed in the immediate aftermath of the election that people just couldn't really see at the time, too close to it.
And you probably had hundreds of people on that when it was all told who were supplying information and testimony and research and all of this, whereas the Steele dossier was a few people. Whatever you think their motivations were, it was a few people trying to get this out quickly, trying to make sense of something. And they say it was never meant to be released. So, of course, it's not going to be what a group of professionals with a lot of resources and a lot more reporting. Subpoena power, yeah. They have access to...
Yeah, I mean, they can get the information if it's out there. And they did.
Then they did. But instead of talking about that, we talked about the Steele dossier and what do people remember about the Russia investigation. I think if you were to poll people and say, what do you remember? I think the top of most people's list is going to be the Steele dossier. And it's not even close to the most thorough account of what occurred. But the right was incentivized to talk about it. It became their straw man. It became their, the left is just crazy. Look at all these crazy things they believed. And then by doing that, the left felt like they were inclined, or even it was necessary, to defend the Steele dossier, whether it got whether things were disproven or debunked or whatever. The left felt like, well, if we're not defending this, then we're letting Trump get away with it.
Yeah.
So it became this thing that we could fight about, and we did.
Oh, did we? So there's a lot of copies of this hard drive out there floating around right now, and it seems like everybody has a different copy of the hard drive that seems to have different information on it. Is any of this stuff verifiable at this point?
I don't think you can just look at anything and say, well, that looks real, and so we should just take it at face value. Certain information has been verified on the original hard drive, and it's, CNN has reported on that. It has been part of the active investigation into Hunter. But you've got a hard drive that started with Rudy, and you've got it with Bannon, and then one of Bannon's guys, Jack Maxey, took it to Europe because he said that, people were after him and he had to get away from the heat. So he went to Switzerland, and then it ends up with this guy named Kim.com, and he gives a copy to WikiLeaks. And okay, so there's 5 at least that we know of. Honestly, it's probably 10 times that at least, and maybe more. And, Maxey claimed to have all this additional information that he found. And so he said, Hunter had deleted it, but he was able to recover
forensic recovery or whatever it was he said.
Right. But then people have already, like Kim.com has already said, oh, that's fake. He's a fabulist. And so they're fighting about it. And I mean, WikiLeaks has a copy, and kind of remarkable that WikiLeaks still exists. I mean, it's obviously just this very thinly veiled cutout for Russia at this point, and Assange is, in jail, and good luck ever getting him out. Right. So, but they've got a brand, right? And so they're still going, and I'm assuming they'll come out with some stories on some things that they found, because I think if you look at how this works, even if you start with the original information, right, you've got, supposedly at least tens of thousands of emails and work documents and all these things. So you can take one of those emails and find, Hunter talking about an LLC, or you've got him communicating with someone you hadn't seen before. And if you want to dig into every single detail on there, if you think there's nefarious plots or, dirty money moving this way and that, then okay, forensic or open source research what, he talked about at one point and see where it goes. But even honest people, even people who are, have the best intentions and are very much trying to get at the truth, which good luck finding that in this crowd. But even that kind of, person, when you're dealing with open source information, as someone who has gone over this stuff quite a bit myself, you have to verify a lot, right? Because if you're looking at a company and the director is John Smith, well, guess what? There are a lot of John Smiths out there. Hopefully, it's not that. But if you start with John Smith and you got to narrow it down to, is this John Smith, the John Smith that owns this company that's linked to Colombian drug smuggling, right? Well, you got to find out the date of birth. You got to find, addresses that match for this guy. You've got to see if you can find a phone number or an email or company website.
Some other piece of corroboration besides what you have.
Yeah. You got to find multiple data points that back up your theory. Yeah,
you're going to say it's this guy. You need to be able to prove it's this guy, or else this guy is going to probably end up suing you if you publish this too much, because you just called this guy 16 kinds of felon in your piece. And yeah, it's just not something anybody who like you said, goes into this with honest intentions, really wants.
If you're dishonest, then the John Smith that Hunter mentioned in his email is, of course, it's that guy. I don't even, there's a John Smith that smuggles drugs. So of course, and Hunter Biden, we all know he's corrupt, and look at all these deals that he's done. Of course, he's dealing with this John Smith. So you can already take real information and have fake findings that back up your narrative of Hunter is corrupt and he took this money from a Colombian drug lord, and we all know the big guy, Joe Biden, is taking his cut.
10% for the big guy.
10%. So already right there, you can go to places that feed into what people already believe. But then if you start adding all these extra hard drives that are out in the wild that, people may or may not have, or, it may or may not have been given to them after, 8 copies were made before them. And then you dump in some fake information, or they add in some fake information. And then, I found out that, not only is Hunter involved with John Smith, but, Jim Brown over here is, he's also got these deals with a Chinese oil tycoon. And so it's just,
before you know it, we're talking about biolabs in Ukraine.
Right. Of course, it's got to go back to those main narrative talking points. It's just, the potential is endless here, and it doesn't have to be real, to actually get traction. But a story always has more potential to kind of go off and go viral and get all this attention if it has the appearance of being real, of, okay, we know WikiLeaks does have a copy of the hard drive. So even if they fake something, even if something that's not real goes out there, well, you're at least starting at one point of data that is provable, that there's a documented history of, hey, they got the hard drive 6 months ago. So it's not completely out of left field. It gives people who want to push that narrative a place to start. So yeah, we just have to be on the lookout for it, because I think we both think it's coming, and
right,
we don't know where it's going to come from, but there are plenty of people out there who are going to believe what's said.
So you look at this and you realize that there's like an infinite amount of stories that could come out of this, an infinite amount of, narratives that people are writing that the laptop plays, the magic laptop, as it were, plays a central part in. What does a guy like Steve Bannon have to gain here?
Well, Steve Bannon currently under an indictment for 5 charges. Certainly could use the money. He's got to pay those legal fees. They've built up China as the great threat and the great peril to, the Western way of things. The Western world is going to be brought down by the evil Chinese communists. And that's a thing that Trump said, and people like Bannon picked up on and claimed to be, spearheading that movement. But is any of it real? Is anything Bannon says or does real? It's certainly a story to sell. It's certainly something that people on the right claim to care about. And some of them do, but I don't think, you've got Steve Bannon over there with Guo, Wing Wei, and, if you trust anything coming out of that guy,
you should give us your phone number so we can sell you, brain pills.
Yeah, exactly.
When we start selling brain pills, we'll sell them to you.
He got fined $539 million by the SEC for
that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
I think it was an initial coin offering, right? He was selling unregistered securities for a digital token called G coins, which actually didn't exist. He had talked about it. He had mentioned it. He had marketed it, but he hadn't even created it.
If only he had actually built it.
If only he had actually.
He did everything but the one thing that's going to keep you out of jail on this.
You can keep $539 million with this one simple trick.
That's $539 million, man. That's a lot. You can buy a lot of laptops with that.
I get the hiccups now.
So it really kind of comes down to the idea of, what does a guy who claims to be a Leninist, what would he possibly want with this kind of chaos? What would he possibly stand to gain by setting fire to as many things as he has as a result of this. You kind of almost have to check the guy a little bit and be like, okay, so this is your story. What motivates you to tell it?
Right.
What do you stand to gain out of this?
Right. Does Steve Bannon just want to watch the world burn? Yeah, you might also want to ask him, if you don't work for these authoritarian states that hate us, that hate the West, that hate the United States, like Russia, China, why do you appear to be working towards the same ends, right?
Right.
And of course he's not going to answer that, but yeah, I mean, I think there's some personal enjoyment that somebody like Steve Bannon gets out of this, but it does raise the question of, gosh, this looks awful familiar. We talk so much about what, Russia trying to sow chaos and dissent and infighting and all these things. And you've got Steve Bannon over there who's just, foot on the gas. And yeah, let's talk about the laptop and all the ways that Joe and Hunter are working at the behest of the Chinese government. And here, let's put this laptop story with the real stuff and the fake stuff, and let's just turn up the temperature and keep it going, and more chaos, more infighting, and make sure you donate to Steve Bannon to keep his war room operating because
the left is trying to silence him, and the corrupt FBI has filed charges against him.
And if you don't want China to win, then you got to donate to me, and they definitely hate me over there because I say so, and
I hang out with this guy that is a dissident because he says so, and
he only targets real Chinese dissidents who are in exile in the West because reasons. They're
not dissidenting right.
Yeah, they're not paying lip service to the real dissident.
It gets kind of hard to figure out why they might be doing that. It seems like there's one really obvious explanation, but no, it's too easy. Couldn't possibly be that.
We couldn't possibly be trying to get these people to trust us and give us, personal information and be involved in our movement before we suddenly and abruptly target them and come after them. It couldn't possibly, be something that would benefit the Chinese government, because that's just crazy. And how dare you? We talk about how much we hate China here every day.
Why don't you believe us? We look honest.
And these very fringe and often disproven theories that we have about China that just make us look crazy and make anyone who supports it look crazy. That couldn't possibly help China. China definitely doesn't want people in the West to look insane and have them putting out these fake criticisms and these fake narratives that China can easily disprove and use in their own domestic propaganda to denounce the West. Can't imagine them doing that, right? That's not
what they do at all.
No.
And Steve Bannon couldn't possibly have anything to gain out of watching society kind of crash and burn in a heap of narratives and arguing and bickering and partisan polarization. Okay, so the first thing that I thought when we kind of finished this was, are we screwed? Are we just completely screwed here? How do we get back from the idea that we've got essentially half the population each in their own echo chamber with the idea that this one piece, whatever it is going to explain everything when it comes to the other side's evil and corruption? How do we fix this?
Good luck. I mean, if you're looking for an easy answer, good luck. There isn't one.
We have no laptop, no dossier to sell you.
No. I think we're here to try to make sense of it, one story, one narrative at a time. And I think long term, one thing I would point to is we need better education on this stuff and how it works. We need people in the classroom learning this stuff, and they've done it. When you look at like the Baltic states and states that border with Russia, they are way ahead of us in terms of understanding information warfare and educating their populace. So I think long term, there is no easy fix. There's no way to make this stop. This is our new reality. This is the world we live in, and it's not going to go away. Long term, we can do things like improve education. Once you teach people about this, then they can go teach some more people about this, and you hopefully that snowballs. But is this politics now? Is this, something we're just going to have to get used to? I think so. I think it's too sexy and appealing, and it provides that instant dopamine hit, and it gives people purpose. Why do people fall into QAnon, right? They found a purpose. They found a reason for being. And we've seen it ourselves. This stuff can drive a sane person mad. It really can. It's dangerous. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. This is serious stuff that will mess with your mind, and almost all of us are not trained for it. And you do have to disengage. You do have to find other things in life, so, to focus on and be involved with.
You can't make this your whole purpose. You can't make this your whole reason for being. You will go crazy.
Because you can't change it too. Because that's part of what's so maddening, is you think you figured it all out, right? These narratives, these stories are so enticing because you think you understand it all. And then you wake up the next morning and nothing is different. Right. You didn't solve the great, you're not Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. You didn't solve the equation, right?
No.
You just
you wake up the next morning and it's basically about where it was the day before.
It's still here. All the same people are still here, and if for whatever reason they end up off the field, somebody's going to replace them. So you do your little bit. You help the small ways that you can. I think everyone can make a difference. I think we can make a difference, but we're not going to cure the disease, right? We're trying to, I guess.
We can try to make our little corner of the world better.
You don't have to take our word for it, but if you listen to us and read enough of what we're saying, and it makes sense, then hopefully you'll keep tuning in. But
and that's why you listen. I mean, and if you're wondering why us, what do we? I mean, what guarantee do you have that we're the good guys? Well, keep listening.
Yep.
We're going to do our best to be the good guys. That's what we set out to do. And if we get to a point where we can't do that anymore, we're not going to do it.
Yeah. It's about trust, and trust is earned, but we are doing our best to earn it.
Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can go to didnothingrongpod.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at James, the word 4, and the letter M, all one word, and Grizza BJJ, Grza BJJ, as well as DNW Pod. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.